To video number 5. So we're almost done. Let's take a look really quickly at named constants and best practices. So in the last video, we just talked about variables versus identifiers, and we talked a little bit about the restrictions on naming identifiers. So when it comes to variables and functions and pretty much anything else, when it comes to identifiers in general, there are a few best practices we like to follow. So the first one of those, and you may have noticed this already, is that generally speaking, we always use lowercase for variables. And I will go back to my radius equals 20. Whoops. So we actually don't need to have a lowercase letter here, and I'm just going to go ahead and add a print statement. Okay? So this does not have to be a lowercase r. This could actually be uppercase. There's nothing wrong with that. Python doesn't have an issue with it. However, best practice when you are coding in Python, and what you will see when you leave college and you go off into the world, is you will see, generally speaking, identifiers are not going to be capitalized in that way. There are a few instances where they might be, but generally speaking, we are going to use lowercase for variables, for variable identifiers. Okay? For something like a very long variable or function or anything, we use what's called camel case. And you might wonder, what the heck is that? It looks like this. We'll say camel case, or sometimes camel case. Now, you've probably actually seen this and just didn't realize there was a name for it, but basically this is where we have multiple words in an identifier and we capitalize each individual word, either starting with the first or the second. For variables, we will typically have a lowercase on the first one. And this is called camel case because you have uppercase and then a bunch of lowercase and uppercase and a bunch of lowercase, and it's like the humps on a camel. It's a cute name. So something like that might be, let's see, my super long variable name equals, and then we're going to assign this a value. Let's make it a string, which is text. We will talk more about strings later. All right. So we have, again, a very long variable name here, and I have capitalized every individual word. The first letter of each word, except for the first one. This is camel case. Okay? And then I can come down here and I can print my super long variable name. And it'll print whatever that variable is. Now, the other thing to note, and I haven't explicitly said this, but in case you missed it, is capitalization matters in Python. So if going back to my example here, if I were to capitalize radius and then print it like this, I'm going to get an error. And in fact, Python is very smart. It's going to go, hey, did you mean this variable that you actually did create? It's going to notice that I did create a variable named radius, and it has a capital R, and it's going to go, are you sure you didn't mean this? Okay, so this radius and this radius are two different variables, okay, to Python. So make sure that you always match your capitalization. And be especially careful when you have super long variable names like my super long variable name. Another thing to note, and I mentioned this, but let's look at it, is constants. Sometimes you have a value that you know is not going to change. An example, a great example that we've actually used in these last few programs is pi. Okay? For pi, we have been using 3.14159. It is a little bit of a pain to type that out, and especially if we wanted to use more digits in it, right? Every time we use it, though, we don't want to have to type out 3.14159, or even more if we want that. So we could create a variable named pi, and we could make it 3.14159. And we could just decide this is going to be a constant. And all that means is it's a variable that doesn't change. Now, Python doesn't actually have a special data type for constants. Some programming languages do. There are some programming languages where you could create a special variable called a constant and then not be able to change it. Python doesn't have anything like that though. So in order to let future us and other programmers know that this is a constant and we don't want it changed, we use capital letters. Okay? And this could be anything. So I used pi, but if we had a longer one, let's say you were making a video game and you wanted to create a constant variable for your characters or for a user's character's name. We might call it char name or character. Don't think I spelled it. There we go. Character name. Okay. And character name is, I don't know, arrows. So in this way, even though, again, Python doesn't actually have a special data type for this, or any kind of special stipulations or anything, this is a tip-off to another programmer or us in the future saying, hey, this is a variable that should not change. This is a special constant or a named constant. Okay? So it is, again, not built into Python, but it is very common and best practice. So it's something that we should remember. One more quick thing that we want to talk about, and I'm going to go ahead and erase this stuff, is we talked about assignment, right? Radius equals 20. What we did not talk about was that in Python, we can actually do more than one variable at once. So I'm going to go ahead and print radius, and we'll see we have 20, right? But let's say that I know not only the radius, but I don't know. Let's consider like a rectangle, right? Where I'm going to have length and width and height. It's a three-dimensional rectangle. Turns out it's actually a square. Let's make it an actual rectangle here. All right. So I have three variables for length, width, and height. And I could print them out like so. All right. And I'm actually going to get rid of this. If I wanted to reduce this a little bit, say I don't want to use up 3 lines of code to do this, I can actually, I'm just going to comment those out. I can do length, comma, width, comma, height equals 20, 20, 30. And just like that, I have done the exact same thing that it took me 3 lines of code to do, 3 separate assignment statements in one single assignment statement. We call this simultaneous assignment. In other words, we're assigning multiple variables at the same time. And if I run this, I still get 20, 20, 30 for my length, width, and height. Okay, so again, we have that. And we have this. And they look exactly the same. In fact, let's put a print statement after each of these. So I'll say this is single assignment, and this is simultaneous assignment. Okay, exact same thing. We assume that, or Python assumes rather, that the order in which the variables are listed is the order in which the values are assigned. So the first variable will get the first value, the second variable will get the second one, and then the third one will get the third one. I could even do something like put some text in there, put a string in there, okay? So this is simultaneous assignment, and it's just another way to do assignment that takes up less space. There is one other thing that we need to talk about, and then that is it for lecture 2. The other thing that we need to talk about here, and I'm going to go ahead and erase this, and again, you can feel free to rewind, walk back the video if you want to see it again, is what we call, there are special assignment operators. So we talked about using an equal sign, right? And these are actually called augmented assignment operators. So we're used to doing something like radius equals 20, okay? Let's say that we were doing, I don't know, a game of some kind, and we needed to keep a count of how many times we had done it. Maybe like a guess the number game or something. Maybe like that'll be a lab eventually. So let's say we have a variable named count, and we want to make count go up 1. So I could say count equals count plus 1, okay? And I have my whole assignment statement. I've got my variable on the left. I've got my expression on the right, which is this variable plus 1, okay? Now, the other issue with this actually, and I'm going to pause a minute here because I want you to think for a minute. Can you spot the issue? This is from the very first video where we talked about variables. What's going to happen when I run this? Go ahead and run it, see what happens. We actually get an error. It says count is not defined because guess what? We didn't actually create a count. So not related to augmented assignment operators, but just something to keep in mind. So I'm going to start count. I'm going to create a variable named count, and I'm going to make it 0. And then I'm going to change it to itself plus 1. Okay? And let's actually print count. And you'll see it prints 1. And I'm going to print it up here too. Whoops. And you'll see I have 0 and 1. Now, this looks like there should be an easier way to do it. Guess what? There is. We can use an augmented assignment operator. That sounds very, very complicated, but actually all it is taking these two operators, so the assignment operator and the mathematical operator, and smooshing them together and putting a number over here. So we're going to take out recalling the variable. We're going to smush this plus and this equals together, and we're going to leave the 1. And it's going to look like this. I'm going to go ahead and comment this out so we can see. It does the same thing. We have 0 from the first one and 1 after our updated count here. So this is an augmented assignment operator. And this is just a quicker way to do it. You could do it with different numbers. Okay, so we'll comment that out too. You could do it with 2. Oops, I accidentally commented out my actual variable there. So we could do it with 2. We could do it with 90. I mean, heck, if we wanted, we could create another variable. Let's just use radius because that's what we've been using all day. And we could say count plus equals radius. Ooh, interesting. So we start count at 0. We said radius is 5.5. Count plus equals radius. So what this means is count equals count plus radius. Remember, it's going to take whatever this is and it's going to add it, okay? The other cool thing is we can do this not only with the plus operator, but we can do this with just about any mathematical operator. We can do plus equals, whoops. We can do minus equal, We could do multiplied by equal. We could do division, floor division, modulus, pretty much anything that we can do that is an operator, a mathematical operator, we can create an augmented assignment operator with by smushing it into an equal sign. There is a chart on these, which I will post up on a page in Canvas, but these are pretty much all of them. Okay, so that is an augmented assignment operator. And that is really the last big important thing that we need to know for Lecture 2. And with that, I am going to leave you, and I will see you soon, and we will talk. Have a good day.